Hello, Lost Mountain students, and welcome to the video for Unit 1, Georgia's Geography and Transportation Systems. The purpose of this video is to help you review for your upcoming test, and also to help you hear exactly what was said if you were absent during the unit. This slide right here is showing you the Georgia standards for Unit 1. The very first standard, SS8G1, is all about describing Georgia's geography and climate. And the second standard, SS8E1, says to explain how the four transportation systems, road, air, water, and rail, of Georgia contribute to the development and growth of the state's economy. These two standards work together to help you understand what the main things you need to learn about in Unit 1 are. Part 1 of this unit is all about the location of Georgia. Relative and absolute location. When explaining how to locate Georgia, there are two types of locations that can be provided to someone. The two types of location data are known as relative location and absolute location, and you need to know the difference between these two things. A relative location is a description of a place in relation to another place. So, for instance, since we are talking about Georgia, we could say that a relative location is that Georgia is located north of Florida, because Florida is another place, and we are saying that Georgia is located north of Florida. Another example would be to say Alabama. Georgia is located to the east of Alabama, or Georgia is located on the eastern coast of the United States. These are all examples of a relative location. The second type of location is called an absolute location. Now, an absolute location, each place on Earth can only have one absolute location. And this is the exact place on Earth that a place is located. And when you give somebody an absolute location, you're not just telling them a fact about how to find it. You are going to give them a numerical value called a coordinate that is made up of two different numbers. And those two numbers in a coordinate are called the latitude and the longitude. Now, to understand latitude, you have to know what the equator is. And we all know that. The equator is that invisible line. It's a horizontal line that goes in the center of the Earth, and it's sort of seen as the boundaries between the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. So Georgia is considered north of the equator, and so Georgia, if we look at this map over here, has a northern latitude. And remember that lines of latitude are the horizontal lines on this map. And you also need to know what longitude is. Longitude is how far east or west something is of the prime meridian. And remember, the prime meridian is similar to the equator in that it's an invisible line that we use to measure how far east or west something is on the globe. Now, on a map, we measure longitude with these vertical lines right here. And since Georgia is west of the prime meridian, or in the western hemisphere, these numbers, which you unfortunately can't see on the map right here, would have the letter W behind it to let us know that it is a western longitude. Latitude and longitude. We've previously talked in this presentation about how absolute location is always given in two numbers called coordinates. And here's an example. So right here we have the city of Atlanta and its absolute location. The absolute location for the city of Atlanta is a latitude of 33.749 degrees and a longitude of 84.388 degrees. Now, if you notice, behind each of these numbers is a letter. This N right here stands for north. And we know that that makes sense for the city of Atlanta because that N lets us know that Georgia or more specifically, the city of Atlanta, is in the northern hemisphere and has a northern latitude because right here we have the equator. The equator measures how far north or south something is, and Georgia is above the equator, so it's going to have a northern latitude. Same thing over here. So this number right here would be your longitude, and it has a W behind it. So if I look at the prime meridian, this right here would be the eastern hemisphere, and this over here would be the western hemisphere. Because Georgia and the city of Atlanta is west of the prime meridian, you're going to have a W behind that number, and that lets us know that it has a western longitude. I'm going to quickly show you how to use absolute location when looking at a map. So down here, we have the coordinates for the city of Atlanta. And we know that this number right here is our latitude, 33.749. So if I was going to try to find the city of Atlanta using those coordinates, I would start with the latitude. Now, every map that has lines of latitude and longitude on it are going to have numbers telling us where we're at on the map. So if Atlanta is at 33.749, I would start at 34 degrees north. I would go about a quarter of a way down because that would be 33.75. And then I would look for my longitude. My longitude is 84.388, so about 84.4 degrees longitude. So I'd go to 84, go a little less than halfway, and draw a line. Now, if I was going to make these lines longer and as straight as I can, they should intersect about at the city of Atlanta, which they do. So when you are using the lines on a map to try to find a place using its absolute location, make sure that you are moving the correct direction based on the numbers on the grid. Relative location of Georgia. Remember that a relative location is the location of a place in relation to another place. And unlike an absolute location, a place can have multiple relative locations, okay? So what are some examples of the relative locations of Georgia? And these are the ones that you are going to need to know on the test. Let's start with the two hemispheres that Georgia is a part of. The first is the Western Hemisphere. So once again, remember that we believe that there is this invisible line that goes around the globe that splits the Earth into two hemispheres. We have the Eastern Hemisphere and we have the Western Hemisphere. We are in the Western Hemisphere because we are west of the prime meridian. Georgia is also in the Northern Hemisphere. So if we look at the equator, we have the Southern Hemisphere below it, the Northern Hemisphere above it. Georgia is located about right here, and we are in the Northern Hemisphere. We also need to know what continent Georgia is on. Obviously, the Earth has 7 different continents, and Georgia is located in North America. We also need to know that Georgia is considered to be in the southeastern region of the United States. So if we look at this map of North America, and more specifically zoomed into the United States, which I have a map of right here, we know that Georgia is in the south and east region of the United States. You are also going to have to know what states border Georgia. So that would be Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, and Alabama. And we can see a map of those surrounding states right here. And we also have to know on the test what ocean borders Georgia. And we know that Georgia is bordered by the Atlantic Ocean. Part 2. Georgia's 5 geographic regions. Georgia's 5 regions. Georgia is a diverse state with 5 distinct geographic regions. And we need to know this definition of a region. A region is an area with common characteristics such as soil, vegetation, climate, landforms, types of recreation, or economic opportunities. Now remember that recreation means the different kinds of things you can do there for fun, and economic opportunities means the types of things you can do there to make money. And the region you live in can have a big impact on the types of opportunities you have. For instance, if your goal is to be a fisherman, you are not going to want to be in the Piedmont region or any of these three northern regions, because the only region where you are going to be near the coast to be a fisherman would be the coastal plains. Same thing if you want to be a mountain climber, you're not going to want to live down here in the coastal plains or the Piedmont where it's pretty flat. You're going to want to live up here in the Blue Ridge Mountains, okay? So regions can affect what kinds of jobs opportunities you have, and they can also impact what kinds of recreation you have available to you as well. Region 1, Appalachian Plateau. So the Appalachian Plateau is located right here in the northwest corner of the state of Georgia. We need to know some of the physical characteristics of the Appalachian Plateau. We need to know that it has flat or gently sloping land up around sort of above the surrounding valleys. So a good example of this would actually be this picture right here, which is of a place called the Cloudland Canyon. Now, the general sort of shape of most plateaus is going to be these kind of hills or slopes with a flat top and then another slope into a surrounding valley, which is what you see exactly right here. You see that this would be the valley, this would be the slope, this is our generally flat top, okay? Now, if we look, the climate in the Appalachian Plateau, it says, is cooler due to its higher elevation. And that is actually true of these top three regions in Georgia, because they have a higher elevation due to being a part of the Appalachian Mountains, or being near the Appalachian Mountains in the case of the Ridge and Valley and the Appalachian Plateau. The climate up there is a little bit cooler, okay? We also want to know that there is not a lot of agriculture in the Appalachian Plateau due to its poor soil and the fact that the ground is just not flat enough in most of this region to farm. We want to know that the people in this region make most of their money through tourism and also forestry. In this region, when it comes to tourism, there's a couple of really cool locations you can go, like this one, Cloudland Canyon, which is a great place to go on a hike or like a picnic or something like that. And then another famous location you could go to would be the Lookout Mountain, which is what you see right here. Now, Lookout Mountain's a pretty cool place because you can hike up to it. There is a waterfall there. And you can also, when you get to the top of the mountain, there is a plaque which will tell you which direction you're looking in. And depending on which direction you're looking in, you can see one of 7 different states from at the top. We want to know that the Appalachian Plateau is also the only known location where coal can be found in the state of Georgia. And we also want to know that this region sometimes has a nickname called the Tag Corner, which stands for Tennessee, Alabama, and Georgia. So if we go over here at this map and we look right here on the corner, you would see that the state of Tennessee would meet right here, and the state of Alabama would meet right here. So we got 3 states that all touch right here at this corner. Region 2, the Ridge and Valley. So the Ridge and Valley region is located in the northern part of Georgia between the Appalachian Plateau and the Blue Ridge regions. And you will see that exactly right by seeing this arrow right here. The name of the Ridge and Valley tells you exactly what its physical characteristics are like. Long parallel ridges separated by wide fertile valleys. And I have an example of that right here in this photo. So you can see that the sloping hills right here that go up would be the ridges, and this valley where you see there's some homes and farms here would be the valleys. This area, the Ridge and Valley, is also has a cooler climate than the Piedmont or coastal plain regions due to its higher elevation. And we need to know that in this region, there is only about 4% of the valleys used for agriculture. So there's not a lot of agriculture in this region. Instead, the major industry in the Ridge and Valley is actually the textile industry and the carpet industry. There is a city in the Ridge and Valley known as Dalton, Georgia, which has the nickname the carpet capital of the world. Once again, in this region, there is a lot of forestry, so cutting down trees to make paper or other types of goods, and also tourism, since you are still close to the mountains or even, close to the Piedmont region where you would find like Atlanta, right? So lots of tourist opportunities in this region. Region 3, the Blue Ridge. Now, the Blue Ridge region is located in the northeastern corner of the state, which you will see on the map right here. The Blue Ridge region, of course, is going to be mountainous because the Blue Ridge Mountains are part of the Appalachian Mountain chain, right? And we need to know why the Blue Ridge Mountains are called the Blue Ridge Mountains. It's because in Georgia, the water from the Gulf of Mexico that is evaporated gets trapped up in the mountains, and from a distance, you can see, even in this photo right here, that the mountain range appears to be blue. We want to know that the climate in the Blue Ridge region, once again, is going to be cooler than other parts of the state. And because of all of that moisture that gets trapped in the air up here, this region gets the most rain of any other place in Georgia, about 80 inches of rain a year. And due to that amount of rain that happens, the Chattahoochee and the Savannah Rivers start to be formed in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Agriculture in this region is pretty small. One of the few sort of famous products that's produced here, there is a place up in the Blue Ridge Mountains called Ellijay, and in Ellijay, they are famous for their apple orchards. To make money in this region, we want to know that the people here sort of rely very heavily on tourism and, once again, forestry or harvesting timber. Now, one of the cool things about this region that's happened in history is that in 1828, in a city up in the Blue Ridge called Dahlonega, there was actually a gold rush there. Now, unfortunately, that gold rush had a negative impact on the Native Americans who lived in this region, a tribe called the Cherokee. And when gold was discovered in this region, the Cherokee, they were forced to leave. And this is one of the things that contributes to what is later called the Trail of Tears, where the Cherokee are forced to leave the eastern coast, including Georgia, and walk all the way over to Oklahoma. We also want to know that the highest mountain in the Blue Ridge Mountains is a place called Brasstown Bald, which is what you would find right here. And we also want to know that a pretty famous tourist attraction here is called the Appalachian Trail, which is where you can hike all the way from Georgia through the Appalachian Trail, and it ends in the most northern state we have, which would be Maine. Region 4, the Piedmont. Now, the Piedmont region is the central part of the state of Georgia and is one of the largest regions we have at about 30% of the state, and you will see the Piedmont region right here where this arrow is pointing. The Piedmont region is gets its name, which means the foot of the hills, because it is right below the three more mountainous regions, the Blue Ridge, the Ridge and Valley, and the Appalachian Plateau. The geography here in the Piedmont region is known to be relatively flat with gently rolling hills. A major sort of differentiator with the soil here in the Piedmont is that this region is famous for its red clay. We also want to know that the Chattahoochee and Savannah rivers, which start up here in the Blue Ridge, flow through the Piedmont region. So, of course, the Chattahoochee River would sort of flow down here and form our border with Alabama until it goes down into Florida and empties into the Gulf of Mexico. And then we would have the Savannah River, which also starts about right here up in the Blue Ridge, and it goes all the way down in through our border with South Carolina and empties into the Atlantic Ocean. The climate in this region is no longer cooler due to a higher elevation. Instead, the climate here in the Piedmont, as the people who live here know, is very, very hot and steamy in the summer, and we get occasionally pretty cold winters. Not a ton of snow in this region, but it does get cold here in the winter. Agriculture. This is going to be the first region that has significant amounts of agriculture. We grow things like cotton, soybeans, and wheat here. And we are also one of the largest producers in chickens or poultry in the entire United States here in the Piedmont region of Georgia. When it comes to economic contributions, this region does have timber and tourism, just like all of these other three northern regions, but it's a little different here because this is the most industrialized part of the state. Remember, the Piedmont region is the most populated part of Georgia. And so there is significant amounts of manufacturing and other industries here. There is some carpet production happening here, but there is, just like in Dalton, but there's also aircraft here. So if you were here in this region, we know that there is the factory that we have here called Lockheed Martin, where they produce airplanes, cars, car companies here like Kia or Mercedes. We have, those types of cars built here. And then also, of course, chicken processing, but there is way more types of factories than that. We want to know that in this region, you are going to find all of Georgia's largest cities, except for, of course, Savannah, which is also a large city. But Atlanta, Columbus, Macon, and Augusta are located here in the Piedmont region. And, of course, Atlanta, Georgia's capital city. We obviously need to know that that is in the Piedmont. Region 5, the Coastal Plains. The Coastal Plains is the largest and southernmost region of the state, and we can see that right here at this arrow that the Coastal Plains makes up about 60% of the entire state of Georgia. Now, the Coastal Plains is unique in that there are actually two distinct sort of parts to the Coastal Plains. There's what we call the Upper Coastal Plains, which is a huge producer of agriculture in the state, and you can see the Upper Coastal Plains is in green right here. And then we have what is called the Lower Coastal Plains here, which is not great for agriculture because of its sandy soil, but it benefits from being near the coast, which brings additional opportunities for the people who live in that part of the state. This area, like the Piedmont, has very, very hot summers, but it does not get as cold there in the winter. In the Upper Coastal Plains, so this green region right here, there is a significant amount of agriculture. This is the most agricultural part of Georgia, and they produce crops such as peanuts, peaches, soybeans, cotton, Vidalia, onions, and pecans. And we need to know that for the economic contributions, that is the sort of primary economic contributions in this upper part of the Coastal Plains. In the lower part of the Coastal Plains, once again, it's not great for agriculture. So they primarily rely on things like tourism and the deep water ports of Savannah and Brunswick. Now, remember that this is it's probably like the second most tourism area in the state of Georgia. You can go to places like Savannah, which I have a picture of River Street right here. There's the islands, the barrier islands, such as Tybee, Jekyll, St. Simons, which are major tourist attractions that are part of the Coastal Plains. And there, of course, because you are near the ocean, you can do a lot of like fishing and seafood processing to make money in this region as well. A deep water port, that is where you can bring in large container ships with goods from all over the world unload them in Georgia and sell them within Georgia or any other state within the United States. We need to know that this region is the location of the very first British settlement in Georgia. So Savannah, which was the first settlement where Georgia was founded at. And we also want to know that the Barrier Islands and the Okefenokee Swamp are located in this region. Part 3, Georgia's key physical features. The fall line. The fall line is a geographic feature that separates the Piedmont and the coastal plains region. And you can see that squiggly line right here with the arrow pointing to it right there. The fault line was formed millions of years ago when this part of Georgia would have been underwater, and the fault line would have been Georgia's coast with the ocean. Due to this part of the state being underwater at one time, it has a lower elevation than the Piedmont region. And when rivers flow through the Piedmont region into the coastal plain and they meet at the fall line, due to that sharp change in elevation where the ground actually literally drops, you start to see waterfalls being formed along those rivers. So it impacted how settlements were created in Georgia over time. Before you had cars and trains and other forms of transportation, people in Georgia would have used the Savannah River or the Chattahoochee River or other rivers to sort of travel around the state of Georgia. And when they got to the fall line, they would have had to have stopped and try to sell any goods they were trying to move if they were farmers, or they would have had to just get off because they wouldn't have been able to pass through this area. And as a result, along the fall line, 3 of Georgia's biggest cities were formed: Columbus on the Chattahoochee and Augusta on the Savannah River. And if you look right here, it tells us that. Now, one of the things that early settlers realized is that the water on the fall line is moving so fast that it was good to be used as a source of power. So they could use that to power mills that would have been used to grind grains to produce things like flour. The Barrier Islands are located just off of Georgia's eastern coast. And you can see here that there are 14 of these Barrier Islands right off of Georgia's coast. Now, the Barrier Islands provide a very, very important function for Georgia. They prevent wind and water erosion of Georgia's coast, and they also provide some protection from hurricanes that may hit the cities formed on Georgia's coast. The islands are a huge tourist attraction for Georgia and bring in millions and millions of dollars for Georgia every single year. Some of the most famous islands at the Barrier Islands would be the islands of St. Simons, Tybee, and Jekyll Islands are the most common for people to go to the beach. Another famous island in the Barrier Islands is one called Cumberland Island, which today is a national wildlife refuge, the Okefenokee Swamp. The Okefenokee Swamp is the largest freshwater swamp in North America. It's located in the lower coastal plains region of Georgia, and the name Okefenokee is a translation of a Native American term that means, in English, the land of the trembling earth. The swamp was originally home to many different groups of Native Americans until Europeans started to colonize the area in the early 1500s. In the 1900s, when a lot of settlers from Georgia started to move into the swamp, it started to be affected by logging and people trying to form factories and different things around the swamp, and it started to really damage the area. In 1937, in order to protect the swamp, it was turned into a national wildlife refuge. So you can no longer go there and cut down trees or hunt animals. Everything in the Okefenokee Swamp is protected by the federal government. Today, the Okefenokee is a major tourist attraction, and hundreds of thousands of people visit the swamp every single year. And this helps support the local tourist industries in the lower coastal plains. Chattahoochee and Savannah rivers. Two of Georgia's most important rivers are the Chattahoochee and the Savannah River. Both of these rivers begin in the Blue Ridge region because this is the region where most of the rain falls in the state, and it helped to form these two rivers. Now, we need to know that the Chattahoochee River forms the border between Georgia right here and Alabama right here. And we also need to know that the Savannah River forms the border between Georgia and South Carolina. We also need to know where the two rivers end. We need to know that the Chattahoochee River empties into the Gulf of Mexico, while the Savannah River ends in the Atlantic Ocean. The Chattahoochee River is very important for the state of Georgia. It is used for water in some of the areas along the river. It's used for industry and for recreation. It's not really used for transportation anymore because the fall line makes it difficult to get ships through, past this part of the Chattahoochee, and there's just better, more efficient ways for transportation today. The Savannah River is important because it also serves as a source of water for different areas along the river. But also, today it is used for things like hydroelectricity, farming, and even to cool a nuclear power plant in Savannah. Part 4, Georgia's transportation systems. Georgia's 4 transportation systems. Georgia is sometimes known as the transportation hub of the Southeast. This is because Georgia has 4 highly developed transportation systems in air, road, railway, and seaports that allows goods and people to be quickly transported around the state of Georgia and around the country. These 4 transportation systems are a big deal for the state of Georgia. They provide many jobs to Georgians, and they also bring in the opportunity for tax dollars and new places to buy and sell goods for Georgia citizens. Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. Hartsfield-Jackson is the airport in Atlanta, and it is considered the busiest airport in the world. If you look right here, you can see that it brings in about 100 million people every year into the state of Georgia. This is a big deal for the state's economy because it gets people into the state, they spend money here, and it benefits Georgia's businesses. It also brings in a lot of cargo that can be sold here in Georgia, or cargo that is from Georgia businesses that can be sold in other places, which helps Georgia's businesses make money. And it also is home to one of the largest employers in Georgia, which would be Delta Airlines. Now, the thing about Hartsfield-Jackson is that it's not just about the airplanes that are there. A lot of different companies all transport goods or people from the airport, and this benefits those industries as well. We need to know this term right here. It's called intermodal transportation. Intermodal transportation is when you use more than one type of transportation system to move goods from one place to another. So if your goods were delivered into the state of Georgia through the airport, and then they were delivered to their final location using a truck, that would be intermodal transportation. The thing that we need to know about Hartsfield-Jackson is that it is also the single largest employer in the state of Georgia. If you were to go to the airport, you could find jobs for lots and lots of different companies. Hartsfield-Jackson's almost like its own little city. It has its own police force, its own fire department. There's all of its own stores and restaurants. And then, of course, all the people who are actually doing the jobs involved with air travel. So if this is the place that has the single most people working there in the entire state of Georgia. One of the things that we do need to know about Hartsfield-Jackson is where its name came from. So the Hartsfield in Hartsfield-Jackson came from a mayor of Atlanta, a guy named William B. Hartsfield, who was the mayor of Atlanta when the airport was funded and built. The Jackson in the airport's name comes from a guy named Maynard Jackson, and his name was added to the airport in 2003 upon his death. Maynard Jackson was the first black mayor of Atlanta, and he also was responsible for the expansion of the airport, where they built the international terminal, which allowed you to fly out of the country from the Atlanta airport. Roads and interstate. Georgia has a large network of roads and interstate that crisscross the state in just about any direction you could want to go. We need to know that Georgia's highways are very reliable, and many industries will move to Georgia because of that reliability. If you look right here, that because of Georgia's fairly mild weather, we very rarely have our roads shut down due to things like snow or ice or flooding. A lot of businesses will want to move here because they know that their roads will always be accessible. We want to know that the roads here are used to deliver about 85% of all goods that are carried to their final destination by truck. Railroads. If we were to go back to the late 1800s and early 1900s, the railroad system would have been one of the most crucial ways to move people and goods all around the country. As a matter of fact, Georgia's capital city, Atlanta, was established because of its railroad usage. Now, the city of Atlanta was originally known as Terminus, and it was because that was a location in the state of Georgia, a central location, where a lot of different train tracks would have ended, and the passengers could have gone from one rail line to another. And that's what the name Terminus meant. It's where the rail lines terminated. As time went on, of course, the name was changed first to Marthasville after a governor who wanted to name the city after his daughter. And then again, it was named to Atlanta, changed the name to Atlanta after the Western and Atlantic Railroad, which was one of the largest railroad companies in the area. We need to know that today, Georgia ranks number 3 in railroad accessibility. And although the rail system is smaller than other forms of transportation today, it is still used to move large goods to their destinations throughout Georgia and throughout the rest of the United States. Deep sea ports. Georgia has 2 deep water ports located in the cities of Savannah and Brunswick. These ports allow businesses in Georgia to sell their goods all over the world. It also allows Georgia to import goods from all over the world. This opens up new markets to Georgia companies and brings in billions of dollars in tax money when goods are brought into the country through this Georgia port. The Savannah port is the larger of the 2 ports and handles about 80% of the goods entering Georgia via ship. At this port, they can handle large bulk cargo items, so like these big container ships that you see in this photo right here. This could include such as large as like cars can be unloaded at the Savannah port. The Brunswick port can also handle large cargo ships, but the Savannah port is able to handle more ships at the same time. We need to know that these ports provide jobs for the citizens who live in this area and provide a lot of tax money to the state of Georgia. The largest takeaway from this discussion of Georgia's transportation systems is that these transportation systems help to create and support hundreds of thousands of jobs in the state of Georgia. Because of all of the jobs building, maintaining, and using these transportation systems, and all of the jobs that are created because that Georgia has all of these transportation systems available, it provides billions of dollars of revenue to the state of Georgia and creates a lot of jobs for Georgia's citizens.